Our next guest has worked for the Massachusetts Office for Economic Affairs, and in today's Financial Times, he wrote about how to cut the federal budget deficit. Joining us now with his plan, Robert Pozen, Chairman Emeritus at MFS Investment Management and Senior Lecturer at Harvard University's Business School. He's also the author of the new book, The Fund Industry, How Your Money is Managed. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today. We are going to talk about something very interesting and near and dear to the hearts of many Americans, and that is the mortgage interest deduction rule. If you take out a loan to buy a house, you're allowed to deduct the interest you pay on that loan. To promote home ownership is really the reason that the government cites for this deduction. But let's start with the most basic question of why. Why does the government want to promote home ownership at the cost of other taxpayers?
Homeownership is generally thought to improve citizenship. People maintain their premises better. They are more active voters. They're more active in citizens groups. So generally, homeownership has a general social benefit. The question is who we should subsidize and whether some of these subsidies are really promoting homeownership. And as you know, I believe that some of them are really not promoting homeownership.
What would you rather see be done, Bob?
Well, I'm okay with having an interest deduction on your primary home up to a certain amount. But we give this deduction, for instance, for people who have second or even third homes. So clearly that's not promoting home ownership. Second is we give this deduction from home equity loans. And everyone knows that home equity loans go to for consumer goods, for boats, for cars, maybe for vacations, maybe for college tuition, but they don't go for home ownership. So these are two low-hanging fruit that in an era of tight budgets we really ought to eliminate.
Bob, you know what folks say is that you take away the mortgage interest deduction and nobody's going to go out and buy houses, or a lot less people are going to go out and buy homes. What do you say to that argument?
Well, I'm not proposing that you take away the deduction. I'm saying you limit it. Eliminate it for second and third homes. Eliminate it for home equity loans.
But even if you but even if you limit it, that you'll have less home ownership.
Well, you will have less home ownership, but here's an important fact. In Canada, in Australia, and in England, they do not have any interest deductions for home ownership, for mortgages, and they have higher home ownership rates. So it's clearly not necessary for home ownership, and we need to think about this as being gradually phased in. In England, they phased it in over 12 years, and it had very little effect on home prices. So the key is to gradually focus home ownership deductions on things that really promote home ownership.
And as you say, I mean, over the long term, it doesn't appear to have boosted U.S. home ownership so much substantially over other countries that don't have this. I mean, why not just axe it altogether, Bob? Why do renters have to subsidize people who can afford to buy homes?
Well, in theory, that's probably true, Matt, but in practice, people are used to this. So I think that politically, if we try to eliminate it totally, it's a non-starter. So what we need to do is limit it to your primary home, take it away for home equity loans, and third of all, let's say mortgages up to maybe $500,000 or $600,000. Right now, it goes up to mortgages up to $1 million. I don't think we can argue that we really should be subsidizing mortgages of $1 million. That's a little high for government subsidies in these tight times.
Yeah, but you know, some would argue, Bob, and you know this, you live on the East or West Coast, and $1 million home, I don't want to sound obnoxious, but it's not necessarily so uncommon or extravagant. I mean, you know, it costs a lot more to live in these areas. I mean, so how do you kind of distinguish?
Not to mention that we never index these things for inflation. So by the time $1 million will buy you just a one-bedroom studio, it'll stay the same.
Well, even in a place like Boston, which is a high-cost area, your average home is in the $400,000 range. So if we said you could have a mortgage up to $500,000 or $600,000 on your home and deduct it, or up to that amount, we'll have been getting the core people who really need the deduction for home ownership. I'm not saying that there aren't houses that cost $1 million or $2 million in places like New York and Boston. The question is, should the government be subsidizing a house beyond $600,000 or $700,000. And that's where I think in times of a tight budget squeeze, we really need to rethink that. You can do it. You'll get the deduction up to $500,000 or $600,000, but if you decide to go $1 million, the last part's on you.
Well, certainly something interesting for our lawmakers to think about. Bob, thank you as always. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Bob Pozen, we should mention he wrote an op-ed on this, which was in the Financial Times today.